Ooh, we are at the top of the hour. This is exciting. Regina, you're in Wisconsin now. I knew that. I think I knew that you had left. And that's why I didn't get to see you as much. So I'm glad you've joined us. And I'm glad that we've got a few people already talking in chat. It looks like we've got about 9 people on total so far. And excited to have all of you for this. This is the first live stream I have ever done. So I'm going to come on camera again and say hi. Hi. Thank you for joining me. If there are any technical issues during the session, please let me know. But so far it's been acting just fine. And we've been having a nice little chat about YouTube and how easy it is to do this. So this is kind of a nice little experiment, actually, because there are so many of us who are doing virtual learning even more than we were doing it before. And here we have YouTube. It's a great live stream experience, and it's really easy for us to use. So selfishly, I'm looking at this as a good, successful experiment, and maybe I'll use it for other projects. So anyway, I will show you what we've got here today. We have a lovely subset of some topics that folks have suggested. And let me toggle, hang on. Technical issues, hang on. I told you this was my first time, you were warned. Okay, there we go. All right. So we do have some questions. I will pop them up here momentarily that folks suggested on LinkedIn for us to go ahead and conversate over today. But one thing I wanted you to think about ahead of time, and I don't like to spring this on people, if you have any ideas about resources that we would all like. Maybe you've got some freebies that you're using right now. David and I were actually talking about the encoder that I'm using right now, OBS, which is running everything in the background of this live stream, and it is actually free. So if you've got tools like that, that would be great resources for other folks, even if they're not free. Go ahead and list those in the chat pod. People can grab those links themselves, or I might actually grab them and display them so that we can take a look at what you've been using. Would love to hear how you're using different technology that you may be adapting to in this new world of ours. So today is going to be entirely focused on basically COVID-19 and different questions around virtual learning. If you are here to promote anything, I would ask that you do it at the top of the session. It's okay to put that there in the chat pod, just a quick mention. I know a lot of us are in a position right now where we are perhaps financially strapped by the current situation. And so if you need to go ahead and mention your product, feel free to do that. Also, just generally speaking, please be courteous. Look for ways to make positive comments and support other people in this chat. There are a lot of people going through a lot right now, and we are here to listen to each other. So the entire point of this chat is not really to listen to me. It's for all of you to be able to chat about these topics and share different resources, which I think I might summarize afterward and post on LinkedIn as well for other folks who couldn't join. And there's my contact information if you want to grab any of that, if you want to tell me something after the session or keep in touch. So there you go. All right, and we will go through these one by one, but again, I kind of like to know discussion topics ahead of time, and you may be the same way so that you can kind of think about them. So these are all of the topics that were suggested on LinkedIn. Granted, the first one is mine. So we will go through these and would love to hear your thoughts in live chat about all of these topics and what you're doing right now that's special for COVID-19 to support your folks and use technology in an even more expanded way perhaps than you were using it before. All right. So here we go, and I'm going to be fancy here. Watch this. I get to use my picture-in-picture. I arranged my slide so I'd have a spot. David has provided the acronym for OBS, which again, that's the live stream software that I'm using right now. It is fully free, and if you choose to maybe put some virtual learning online for your folks, definitely would suggest using it. It's very easy. The nice other part is a lot of people think that YouTube, if they've never uploaded something before, they think it's fully public. You can actually make a video or you can do a live stream like this that's only open to folks that you're providing the link to. So don't feel like if you want to record a class just for your organization that this is the wrong tool. This is actually a perfect tool for that. So there you go. All right, so first discussion topic today, I was curious to hear what support everyone is offering for learners. And this is kind of an open topic. So support can come in many different forms. And obviously, we as learning professionals work very closely with HR and we work with communications and so on and so forth. So we've got all of these learners that are dispersed across the world. They're working in their homes now. Are you providing work from home content? Are you providing some sort of emotional support content? Are you holding maybe open houses or open meetings for folks to come in and just chat with each other now that they're at home and maybe they don't have the water cooler situation? I'm just curious to hear what exactly you're rolling out and what you might be doing. So a few things that I have heard from other folks and actually seen a little bit also at my company, a lot of folks are actually doing open chat rooms. So people can come in, and again, it's encouraging that kind of water cooler conversation so that people can still have a little bit of an informal conversation the way they would in the office. That's been something. Also, just looking for self-paced content and resources. If you've got any on-demand libraries that you're already under license with, making sure to fully utilize that content so that you're definitely rolling out all of those different things, promoting them to the correct learner teams. Also, if you've got facilitators that maybe are already teaching virtual classes and you can roll those out in more quantity, I think they would definitely be appreciated right now. And David says, just did virtual exams for a high school in Vancouver. So that would be an interesting thing to have to do. Curious how that works exactly from a compliance standpoint, because, you know, a lot of people, at least in the legal industry, accounting, different things like that, some things just are not allowed to be done virtually. So curious if that's something that you ran into, if there were legal issues with that or not. So let's see, what else can we say about offering support to learners? One of the other things is in terms of your self-paced curriculum, your on-demand content, making sure that it really truly is visible, because people during this time are probably so busy adapting to this current environment that they're not going to go digging for that content. So if you can go create a learning path and make that visible either on your intranet homepage or on a page that's very visible to them that they're automatically going to be on, if you can do maybe a little tagline on, let's say, a CEO's message or someone else's message, so that there's a little bit of training content interspersed with that communication, that might be another option as well, because we don't necessarily want to distract from all of the important messaging that's going on in our organizations, but at the same time, we need to get out the word about some of the supportive content that we have. And also, if you are in HR, but maybe working separately, or you are an entirely separate team, meaning the learning organization is separate from HR, maybe work with them and say, we've got this, let's say, self-paced content from on-demand libraries. Would you like emotional support content of some kind? Would you like ergonomics content? That's definitely a popular one from what I'm hearing right now. People want to learn how to set up their workspaces at home. Definitely talk to HR about that stuff. Also, there are a lot of resources that I've seen popping up on LinkedIn and also on YouTube, just basically free course materials that different vendors are putting out just to be nice. And I can't vouch for necessarily the quality of that content, because a lot of the stuff that I use, at least internally, comes from on-demand libraries. But if you're looking for free content right now, it's out there, particularly content that has to do with COVID-19. So definitely use Google, use LinkedIn, use your resources to see what might be out there for COVID-19. All right, so if anybody has any thoughts that they want to share around that topic, if you've got any resources that you're using that you would suggest, definitely call those out. Personally, I've been taking some LinkedIn learning courses, which I know of a lot of great on-demand vendors, but they happen to be one of my favorites. They've got some great stuff on time management, and they've got a particularly wonderful course that's on managing stress for change. And I reviewed that one the other day thinking, oh, that would be perfect. What more are we going through right now than change? And it was a great course. It's about an hour long, and you might really enjoy that content if you've got a license for that, which I know a lot of us do, because I know a lot of folks on here are actually from LinkedIn. All right. That was my desktop picture, by the way. If you saw that briefly, I'll show it to you again. So that, by the way, is Scrappy Owl. That's his nickname anyway. And when I first became an LMS administrator, Scrappy Owl was basically my insignia, because that's what I looked like when I was running my first attempt at an implementation. So there you go. I figured some of you would appreciate that. All right. Next page. All right. So next topic for us today was actually suggested by Anna, who couldn't join the live stream, but hopefully can join and look at the recording later on. So she was hoping to get some suggestions from the group, from other professionals, about what is the most challenging things that you're facing in terms of technology. You might be using technology in ways that you've never had to use it before. It might be that your employees are just simply not used to interacting virtually or working on a team that is virtual. So just curious what you might be going through in terms of that. I think it also varies perhaps by whether you've got a large organization or a small organization, and also the kind of work that you do, in the sense that if you have a lot of team-based work that has to go on and people are used to meeting in person, that can be a huge challenge. If you've got a large organization and perhaps people aren't really sure where they need to go for help, they're kind of reliant on the physical structure and being able to go to different people's offices to find help, that can definitely be a huge challenge once there's no office and it's just the internet and emails and distribution lists. So I would be curious to hear what you're going through in those terms. From what I have heard personally, at least for large enterprises, one of the biggest things that's hard is just knowing where things are, finding the resources. And that's perhaps something that can be worked on after the crisis, in case this happens again. Hopefully it doesn't. Making sure that there is infrastructure and people can find things. There are some things I think that we can do now, even though that infrastructure may not be perfect. A lot of it is communication. So making sure that folks have the most critical information that they need right now at their fingertips. So really thinking very carefully about communications and setting things up correctly, making sure that people know how to contact IT, the appropriate areas of IT to get support for different issues like hardware or software. One of the other issues that I have heard a couple people mention lately, and it doesn't have to do with training, but it's kind of critical to what we do. People are really having trouble setting up their workspaces at home. So it affects everything. That affects your ability to deliver virtual learning. Your folks may not have the equipment to actually hear you or see you or interact appropriately. And one of the things that I've heard in terms of how that's being handled, there's a couple different approaches. One, some IT departments are actually stripping their offices and repurposing monitors and equipment that used to be at home. They're basically packaging that up and either shipping it or delivering it to people's houses. So there's that. And we're talking about, I've heard that from a few people who are in, 300 to 500 person offices. So that's taking a lot of work on the part of IT to set up. The other option is to just equip people to equip themselves. So giving people a stipend and allowing them to actually purchase the equipment that they may need. The other part around that, and this is kind of the training element of it, I guess, is letting people know what equipment they may want and maybe also how to set that up. So this might be a time to either find short videos of, let's say, how to set up your Logitech webcam, or make a video like that, show people how to do a desk setup within your organization, because it's different for all of us. It depends on what kind of work you do. If you code, you might have your monitor actually turned so that it's vertical, and you might need to know how to set your display to do that. So folks might appreciate that kind of instruction from you right now, that basic technology information, making that really available to them. Also, any kind of information that you can relay from an HR standpoint in terms of policies around paid time off, changing rules, changing policies. A lot of, I think, the learning role in this kind of an emergent situation is making sure that we are communicating and informing our learners as much as possible. So that's a key part of this, and that might be where a lot of the challenge lies for a lot of people. In terms of virtual learning specifically, it may also be engaging the learner and making sure that they're actually at their computer, because that can be a problem. If you have webcams, particularly just if you have built-in webcams for folks to use on their laptops, make sure that you are promoting a culture where people attend meetings, they attend virtual trainings with the camera on, so that you can see them. It's not just for surveillance purposes. It's also so that you can see, as the facilitator, if somebody's got a question, if they're confused, if they're not engaged. One of the biggest things that I struggled with when I first started doing virtual facilitation was actually knowing how people felt. That made me nervous to not be able to see my audience. I've gotten over that since then. But the webcam and actually being able to see attendees will also probably make your facilitators a little more comfortable if they're not used to this. Personally, also, one thing that I would recommend for facilitators is to simply give them the opportunity to practice delivering virtual learning. A lot of us are very nervous when we have to deliver that kind of training for the first time. That can really be stressful, even if you've only got one or two people that you're teaching at a time. So maybe partner your trainers so that they can teach each other, and it's almost like, they're doing teach backs and things like that. get them used to using your web conferencing applications for training if they are not used to that. It's very different using a conferencing application for a meeting versus using it for teaching. Because typically, if this was, let's say, GoToMeeting, if it was Zoom, if it was Connect, we would be using polls, we would probably be using breakout rooms, we would be using a lot of interactive tools and maybe whiteboarding, different things like that, that you don't necessarily need in other environments. So I would definitely recommend that. David says, yeah, there is a learning curve, and that's absolutely true. So even in this kind of an environment where we're really trying to adapt quickly and change quickly, we need to give facilitators time to adjust. If we don't do that, we are really doing a disservice not only to the facilitator, but also to the learner, because it won't be as good of an experience. We can't just take something that's, let's say, a live PowerPoint that's normally done in a classroom and roll it out virtually and expect that to be a good or an engaging experience. It takes a lot more instructional design thought to make that work. David says, what is the minimum setup for a test case? Like for 2 people, how do you handle load? That's actually a really good question. I would say it depends on what your end goal or your outcome is. So if you're preparing, let's say, let's use a real use case. Former employer, we had several, actually we had 5 people who were going to be teaching onboarding sessions, virtual onboarding sessions for large groups of summer associates who were going to be coming in. So this is a law firm. And the idea around that was to basically have a facilitator and a host and probably around 20 people, and it was interactive. And it was a long session. So we tried to mimic that as much as possible. We had a few people per practice session, and we would at least do 45 minutes or an hour during that practice session to give them time to at least go through a good chunk of the curriculum. They could basically pick which chunk they felt like they needed the most practice with, using interactive tools, interacting between the host and the facilitator. That actually takes practice as well if you're using a host for the first time. So 4 to 5 people in the audience seemed to be helpful to people who were trying to conquer nervousness in front of a virtual audience. If you're used to being in front of a virtual audience and you're just testing the technology, I would say one-on-one is fine. It just depends on whether the facilitator really needs to feel the energy of what it feels like to have a small group virtually, if that makes sense. And David says, got a virtual teleprompter. Okay, that is very clever. I've never done a teleprompter for a virtual learning class. I have done them for stage settings, certainly, and I have on occasion used an ear prompt. So this is actually something that might be useful to someone. What you can do, let's say you have to give a long speech and you don't want to have to dig your face into a piece of paper. One of the things that you can do in this kind of a virtual setting, either, as David is saying, you can create your own little teleprompter. And David, if you've got suggestions for that, that would be great. The other thing you can do is what I call an ear prompt, which you basically record the whole speech. So you've got it in an audio file, and then hook it up to an iPod or whatever else to play it back. Have an earbud in your ear. And as long as you leave pauses in between phrases, you can actually follow the recording and just spit out the words in chunks that you're hearing in the recording. It's kind of crazy the first time you do it, but it's actually a lot easier than it sounds. And it will enable you to make eye contact with the webcam without having to look at a piece of paper, and you can actually get through a lot of content that way. So just an idea. There you go. All right, so those are some challenges. If you've got any challenges specifically that come to mind that you would want to share with Anna or with your colleagues, certainly do that. But for now, we will move on to another question that came in from Helen. And all of these were collected, by the way, in different LinkedIn groups. I posted and asked them what they would want to know from their colleagues about COVID-19. So what's the best technology, cheapest for quick setup and usage with training? So I figured some folks might have some suggestions around this. I certainly do, as to how you are engaging your folks in new and different ways. David had mentioned earlier before we started the session that he was going to be exploring Adobe Connect. And I wanted to mention this because I do work for Adobe, but right now Adobe Connect is free for 90 days. So if you need a platform, a web conferencing application to teach virtual classes, take a look at it. Because again, it's free. It's something that you can utilize right now. There are a lot of web conferencing applications that are running deals. So they're either entirely free right now, or you can go in and maybe have a meeting with 5 people for free for a specific duration. So even if you've looked at something in the past, like let's say Zoom, and you decided you didn't want it, everybody is discounting things right now. And that's really nice of the vendors to be kind of working with us and help us out with the situation. So take a look at that. I have some ideas that I wrote down for you. One of them, and I just looked at this recently. Are you guys familiar with Kahoot? Because that's actually a very fun way, and I'll type out how you spell that in case you don't know. Come here, you little mouse. See, here are the problems with teaching and having this many monitors. It's actually hard to do sometimes because you lose windows. But this is how you spell Kahoot. Oh, it's giving me an error. I wonder if that's because I'm the host. That could be why. Anyway, Kahoot. And it is used for a variety of different things, but you can use it either in a live or a virtual setting. And the nice part about it is you can basically have people fill out polls, and you as the facilitator get real-time feedback as to what that person has answered in the poll. So you're seeing basically a leaderboard as you're going through that. You can basically set a time limit. So, question pops up, everybody in the class has 10 seconds to answer that question, and then you see kind of the overall feedback of how people did. You can do fill in the blanks. You can use it a lot of different ways. So in the past, I have seen this used a lot in the live settings, in the classroom settings, and it's a lot of fun. But you can use it just as well in a virtual setting. It's inexpensive. You have everybody install it on their mobile device, and you can be in an environment like this and do polling and different things like that. So that's one way that you could potentially use Kahoot in this environment. We mentioned YouTube. Since we're using YouTube right now, that is entirely free. And again, I had mentioned before we started class here, but it not only is it free, you can hide the content. So it doesn't have to be fully public. It can be something where, you're just sharing out a link with the folks within your organization. Nobody else can see your live stream or your recording. So definitely consider that. I believe Vimeo also has some options that way, although you can also have paid options. There are a lot of other tools. If you've got Slack within your organization, use Slack. Slack is oh so amazing for cohorts in particular. If you've got a class maybe of onboarding folks and you want to interact with them over the next, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks, have people post resources, post questions, and have the facilitator be able to answer them in real time, that would be an amazing thing to do. Just create a channel for them in Slack and be able to help those people. Also gives them a sense of community, even though they're working from home. So that might be a really nice thing. And you still get that benefit of basically like a water cooler conversation where there's informal conversations going on. Other people may overhear it because it's a Slack channel. So there's a lot of benefits to that. Regina says, I was looking at Poll Everywhere to do that, meaning the Kahoot scenario. You provide them a link at the beginning of the session. So that would also be a nice thing to use. I think I've seen that one at a conference where a facilitator put up the link on a PowerPoint slide, and everybody could they could scan the QR code that was also on the slide, they could click the link, and it brought up the poll. They were able to fill it out, and then the facilitator was able to show the results when they were finished. So that's another great tool. Thank you, Regina. Let's see, what else is there that is useful? Wanted to mention Padlet, which is another application that you might find helpful in delivering games and things like that. The other thing that I particularly wanted to mention, I'm big on free and repurposing instructional design and keeping people engaged. One of the things that you can do, and I've mentioned this in some of my webinars, doing a scavenger hunt for your virtual folks, where maybe you have them get up in the middle of a long session and they need to go off, get something and bring it back, or complete a short craft and bring it back with whatever they have in the house. Some kind of an activity where they can do something or find something in their house, bring it back, and then do basically a show and tell with the group. That might be kind of fun in certain settings, particularly, again, for onboarding for those of us who are still handling that. So you might want to do that. You can also have people do things like scavenger hunt in their house and take pictures of different things and upload them to a shared folder. In office settings, it's fun to do scavenger hunts where you have QR codes around the office, and you can send somebody basically to find, let's say, the fire extinguisher or the stairwells, different things like that. Once they actually find that location, they can scan the QR code. You can hook that up to your LMS and actually see how much of the floor map people have covered. For some folks, that actually helps them meet safety and compliance requirements for their organization or for their state. So that's something that you can also consider for when you get back to the office. So there you go. Couple things in terms of technology. I would say in terms of best technology for this kind of a virtual setup, I will just share my personal love of the Blue Yeti microphone. Hopefully you won't hear like a weird sound, but I'm going to pick up my microphone. So there we go. That's the Blue Yeti mic. This guy follows me around, and I'm setting him down carefully. Great for travel. So when this is all over and you can leave your house again, you will like him. He's great. Also, if you can get a windscreen, that's a nice thing to have, at least for voiceover, although you can hear me right now, and I don't think I really need a windscreen right now, about 8 inches from the mic. So Blue Yetis are available very commonly. They're on Amazon. You can get used ones for under $100, refurbs, that is. So you've got a lot of choices in terms of the Blue Yeti line. No, I'm not getting paid to talk about them, but they are great mics. The webcam that I'm using right now is a Logitech, and those, again, are very inexpensive. Those run $30 to $40, and it's a pretty high quality webcam. So you can have those things. The headset that I personally use is this guy here, which I'll show you, from Jabra. And he's a Bluetooth, I don't know why he's a he and not an it, but it's a Bluetooth headset that is noise canceling. So it's great if you have kids screaming in the background, although I don't have kids. It's also great for call centers. So a lot of people who work in call centers actually use these headsets and different other equipment that Jabra sells. So it may not be the cheapest equipment by any means. Some of their noise canceling stuff is actually pretty pricey, but they've got an entire line, and you might want to check out what they have as well. Also, I think in this environment where we're adapting to COVID-19, we're doing maybe more self-paced learning production. Plan ahead, meaning think about your projects for the next few weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. And let's say if you're doing video production for the first time, e-learning production, something like that you haven't done in the past, call somebody who's done it and ask them what kind of equipment they use. If there's something special that you need to order. Again, if you've never used a microphone, maybe you want to go ahead and order the microphone. There may be other equipment that's really helpful, like headphones for editing audio. Having a high quality pair of headphones for that. So ask one of your developer friends, or if you want to message me, you can do that as well. And I'll make suggestions so that you have that equipment when you actually need it. I'm hearing from some folks internally where I work, and also some friends just in general in the development space. Some things are selling out, and there have been delays just in general with shipments. As you may be aware, Amazon's warehouses have been a little bit touch and go due to COVID-19. So it would be a shame if you had to delay a project just because your stuff came in late. So maybe order that a little bit further out than you would normally. So just some suggestions for you there. And feel free to continue sharing in chat if you've got some things that come up for you. But in the meantime, I'm going to go on to Ben's question. And I try to pick amusing pictures. I like this one of the typewriter. So Ben asks, when shouldn't we use technology? I paraphrased Ben's question a little bit because he gave more context, which was that sometimes we assume that because instructor-led training is training, that we should continue delivering it no matter what happens. And that is not always necessarily the case. There can be cases where something does not play as well virtually as it does in a physical setting. Also, this is just my personal opinion, sometimes you just need to take live training and really, really, really retool it so that it can be effective in a virtual setting. So, for example, what comes to mind for me is, let's say you've got a one-day workshop, full 8 hours, and you want people, let's say a group of 40 people, to be interacting in small group settings. You're doing different breakout groups, and you want people to circulate in between those groups and have one-on-one conversations. You want them to be whiteboarding together. You want them to be doing a lot of activities where they're basically intermingling and having informal conversations, kind of like a brainstorming session, if you will. That can be a really great sort of immersive learning experience for folks, and it's something that a lot of organizations are doing more and more of rather than doing traditional classroom training. It's probably one of the harder things to deliver in a virtual setting, though, both technologically and also in terms of coordination. So you can do it. That particular scenario, you would definitely want to make sure you have a web conferencing application that can handle breakout rooms. And the other thing that I would consider with something that's long, like that 8-hour session, what are the pieces of that 8-hour session that can maybe be delivered in self-paced chunks? Maybe you can have somebody take an e-learning course from a course library. for part of it so that they can do it in their own time. Then you can have smaller sessions, shorter in duration, where they're interacting with a facilitator or maybe doing breakout groups. One of the biggest things that I have encountered in teaching virtual learning is simply that people get bored. It's hard. We're doing a 60-minute session right now. It's very informal, and we're not really doing a lot of like polling or interactions. It's still hard to pay attention for 60 minutes. It just is. You want to check your email. You're sitting in front of your computer. There's tons of things that you could be doing other than looking at me. And you probably are, and that's fine. It's just, we have to think about that and accept that the learner is either going to only pay attention for 20 minutes, and we need to make our training in chunks like that, or make the training something that they can listen to and do something else, so that we're kind of anticipating their multitasking. Up to you as to how you want to go with that, but that's definitely something to think about. I know a lot of organizations are pushing off live events, live trainings. They're not even trying to do a lot of their catalog, their normal teaching right now. They just figure once COVID-19 blows over, which hopefully, fingers crossed, it will soon, everything will go back to the normal schedule. So that's another option, and it requires a lot less retooling. That being said, some organizations are still very, 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 very reliant on the traditional classroom method of training. And as we are expanding, as we're becoming a more global workforce, we have to have options, I feel, as trainers. So if you're in a position where a lot of your training is live and there is no alternative, maybe this is actually a really exciting opportunity to at least take the most critical trainings, prioritize, basically, your trainings, and roll those out to your folks and see how those do. This could be the start of a bit of a revolution, not necessarily to replace traditional classroom training, but to have the option of delivering the same quality of training experience in a different way. So it's not all dark and dismal, I suppose. So poor Ben, he's asked a wonderful question, but I think there are a lot of settings where you can use technology. In a nutshell, this is my answer to it. There are a lot of settings where you can use technology, but you have to retool with that technology in mind. All right, we have come to our last couple of questions, and these are both from Karen. She actually asked a few different questions, and they were all great, so I kept a couple of them. How do you ensure that your instructors have the capability and skill to teach virtual instructor-led training? So we've talked about this a little bit, actually, going back to the idea of maybe having your instructors train the trainer and teach each other and practice virtual learning. There are also a lot of great guidebooks out there, let's say from ATD. They've published a few guidebooks on how to get started with virtual facilitation. Certainly, Cynthia Clay is another great resource. She tends to specialize in teaching trainers how to teach virtually, and actually in another setting at a former employer, I had her come in and teach our trainers how to do that. So you might want to consider reaching out to somebody who you know is a great virtual facilitator, maybe having that person come in and speak with your learners, give them kind of an overview. If you don't know somebody who's specifically great at virtual facilitation, maybe there's somebody within your organization, within the IT team, let's say, who's really great with your web conferencing application. and can at least show everybody the different features of that so that your trainers can kind of look at that and go, oh, wait, I never thought about using this feature, or I didn't even realize that was there because we normally disable it. Talking through that. Also, what might be useful is generally just reaching out to IT and saying things like, in your experience, IT, what is the maximum number of people that we can have in a session without lag? Have there been any technical issues with freezing? Certain platforms perform better for large groups of people, like 200 to 400 people, with the webcam off. So those are things that are good to know coming into a session. Another thing that you may want to ask IT is, let's say you're using one of the conferencing applications that has different modalities. So you can a lot of times the attendee can use the HTML version, or they can download the application and go in that way. Ask them which way is most stable. Sometimes with web conferencing applications, if somebody is going in through their browser or through the HTML portion that's allowed, it's not as stable. So those are just things where it's not necessarily about the facilitator being comfortable. It's about the facilitator being informed ahead of time and feeling like they know the environment that they will be teaching in. There's something very reassuring about knowing that the setup is really optimized for how you're going to be using it. So just something to think about. Any other ideas that folks have in terms of increasing the capabilities of instructors or increasing their skill set in this particular setting? Is there anything that you would do to help with that? One thing that I would suggest, and actually this is something I've used in the past, not specifically for COVID-19, but to have a weekly informal meeting, a virtual meeting between your trainers, maybe even across all of the different training departments within your organization if you're one that's kind of split out. Sometimes you've got technology trainers, the HR trainers, and so on. Bring everybody together either on a Slack channel or in a meeting like this and have people share best practices. It is so funny to me that we're so great at training other people and putting information out to them, but we don't share our best practices with each other. Probably because we're busy, and particularly with everything going on with COVID-19, it's hard to make time to share best practices, but it could be that somebody on the other training team that you know very well has figured out a perfect solution to something that you are trying to figure out how to deliver, and you just need to talk to that person. So enabling your team to communicate in this kind of a setting, while again, it doesn't relate right to instructional design, it's critical because there are certain things that are specialized just to your work environment, just to your learner base, and you have to share best practices in order to really benefit from everyone within your org. So there you have it. Karen asks good questions. So we have another one from Karen as well. How do you explain to your executives, and I hope you pitch in on this one because I have a feeling we've all been through this at some point. How do you explain to your executives that we shouldn't be rushing to put everything online without a thorough analysis? Well, I think there are a lot of different ways that you could potentially approach this. I would say it depends on what exactly they're trying to rush and put online and why. And it also depends on the length of the training, the in-depth nature of the training. A lot of times I think executives are afraid of losing continuity. So they're going, okay, well, we just hired a bunch of people before COVID-19 hit, and if we don't maintain continuity, if we're not continuing classes like usual, then we lose part of the pipeline. Those people become discouraged, or so on and so forth. We're losing productivity because we're not enabling them. So I don't know that executives really care so much about the delivery format sometimes. Sometimes it's just what they're afraid of. And if we can speak to that, if we can give a solution to what they're afraid of, we can solve the issue. So in this particular case, if it is somebody who's, let's say the executive is concerned about new hires who are coming in, maybe utilize the self-paced content that you have to whatever degree you can. So you might have, let's say, tip sheets that cover some of the necessary information. You might have some videos. You might have, again, self-paced course library content that you can pull in that at least fills some of the gaps that you're trying to build. And then look at it and go, okay, what is remaining? What are the assets that we don't currently have? Do we need this to be a virtual learning session? If so, why? Is that going to be a good experience for the learner? Does this need to be a video? Does this need to be blended? I think in a lot of cases, what we're trying to put out is going to be in a blended format, meaning some of it is self-paced, some of it is videos that have been developed in-house, some of it is course libraries, and some of it does need to be virtual. But we need to be mindful of our training resources. At a time like this, there's a lot more one-on-one training happening in this kind of a setting just by virtue of the fact that everyone is spread out. So we need to let executives know that and show them how time is being spent. That's part of it, I think, is just informing as to what is happening within the organization, what's being accomplished, and then also deciding, okay, here are the pieces that we already have, and then you can kind of focus on smaller bits that can be delivered, maybe in a virtual setting. I hope that makes sense, and I don't know if that resonates with anybody else who would want to share about this, if that might be the approach that you've taken, or if you've taken an entirely different approach. I think a lot of times as a consultant, the method that I've used when somebody comes to me and they're rushing to do something is to try to figure out what they're afraid of. And if you can figure out what they're afraid of, what's ultimately driving that rush and that hurried behavior, if you can give them a solution to that fear, that's what's going to be most effective for both parties, and it will get them to slow down and listen. So sometimes it's about that approach, I would say. All right. So let's see here. I wanted to leave a few minutes at the end, and it looks like we've got about 6 minutes left, in case anybody wanted to add questions, if they had other comments, other concerns, things that are going on within the organization. Also, if you've got anything in terms of, let's say, resources that you wanted to share with people. Another one that came to mind as we were talking through this is Yammer, which is a really exciting resource that a lot of universities are using for discussion boards and things like that. So that's definitely something to look into. Another one that I would suggest, honestly, look at your learning management system or your learning technology platform, your LXP, whatever you want to call it. Look at that platform and make sure that you actually have all of your features turned on. The reason I say that is because there are often a lot of features that administrators have just disabled, and you can use those things. For instance, social learning features. So you might have the ability to actually roll out discussion boards within your learning management system. You might have ways to run a live chat or do asynchronous training within your platform, and you're just not using them because you haven't needed those features. So it's definitely worth, I think, asking your folks. And, if you're not an administrator, ask your administrator. Is everything turned on? Is there anything else that we can utilize? If you need to, go to the vendor and ask them what they would suggest for the new training that you're going to be delivering, because sometimes the vendors have really good ideas. They've seen use cases at other organizations that you might be able to kind of replicate or build on. So those are just some ideas to get everybody kind of engaged using what you already might have within your organization. And again, definitely explore live streaming. And David was talking a bit earlier about Facebook Live. Obviously, YouTube was kind of a fun choice. You can do different things through LinkedIn as well. You can even create actually LinkedIn groups. If you need to create a group somewhere, you can also do that on Facebook. So there's all different ways to utilize social media and other free platforms for learning. And this has been a very fun first experiment for me in terms of just doing a live stream for the first time and seeing what that would be like. So thank you very much. I appreciate all of you for attending this. I will be posting a recording of it if you want to take a look at it again, and I'll probably also put together some notes from this session as well. So I appreciate you guys, and I hope that you are staying safe, have some nice coffee and chocolate at home to keep you company, and I look forward to seeing you on LinkedIn, Twitter, all of those other places that you probably heard about this session. So have a great day.